everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today's wildcard day, where we look at things that are a little bit different from our other scheduled videos featuring specific artists. So today we are looking at Vortex issue number 4. I've already reviewed issue 1 and 2. Unfortunately, I do not have a copy of issue 3. If at some point I do get one and find one, I will be reviewing it. But for the moment, we're going to skip ahead to issue 4 because it's the only one I have. Issue 4 published in February 1994. Why am I interested in Vortex? Well, one of the guys here, Martin, one of the artists who I think does a really good McFarlane riff from the early 90s. There were a lot of them, some to varying degrees of success, but I think in his case, he's a very skilled artist, working on that McFarlane style, but slowly but surely kind of developing his own style as well. So it's a fun kind of comic to look at. From that point of view, and also he's pretty darn young when he's doing this. I think he's like 17 or 18, so, you know, any kind of rough edges in the story and the art, you know, can kind of be forgiven because there's a lot of really good stuff to look at. Just like this cover, I think is pretty interesting. We've got our main character, Vortex. Now, Vortex used to be fully masked and have a domed kind of covered head, so I don't know what's going on here. He's already got changed his look a little bit to be a little bit more 90s. And from what we'll see on the inside, basically going for that Brad Pitt, is it Legend of the Fall look, or kind of like, you know, Interview with the Vampire. Anyways, for some reason, it just to me looks like a very of that period Brad Pitt kind of look. As you can tell from the cover here, there's a baby and it says graphic violence advisory may not be suitable for children. Just want to warn you ahead of time, this book does deal with the theme of abortion, and very graphically. So, you know, if you think you might be triggered by that, just be prepared, I guess is what I'd say. I don't have any opinion, not going to be emitting any kind of opinion on that anyways. The artist himself does in the letters page, which I'll read. And again, even maybe if his views are different than yours, obviously in these current times and what's been happening in the past few weeks, you know, let's consider someone else's opinion and we can agree to disagree, and no need to get too worked up about someone having a different opinion. So that's enough about that, and let's have a look inside as to what exactly I'm talking about here. Love this first page here with some really wild cartoony animals. The fish, you know, being hunted by this not just regular cat, clearly like a very exaggerated monster saber-toothed cat, right? I like the design of the page, you know, the black panel behind both of these figures here to create some layering, the extra profile shot, the kind of explosion of the water. I think all of it works really well and makes for a fun page. So yeah, Matthew Martin, is the guy who produces all of this, right? All the art, all the lettering. I'm not sure what Alan Stewart does exactly. He's credited as the pub, so I guess that's where they go and drink. I'm not sure if I'm right on that. But yeah, so this is Vortex's old look with the full mask and the domed head, right? But one thing I'm going to point out on this page, and that kind of applies to the whole book, the art is great, I think, and pretty fun all around. The only issue is that because he's publishing in black and white, and I'm not faulting him for that, one, economics and time-wise, you know, you save a lot of time not having to color the book, and you save a lot of money not having to print it in color, although today maybe that's not so cost prohibitive, but back then it was to a certain extent. It made a huge difference. I feel like his art is still kind of conceived for comic pages that will be colored, so not quite enough contrast sometimes that, you know, some more black, big black spaces like the panel behind here would help a little bit with the readability of the pages. The art is great, but there's a certain lack of contrast that usually would be filled in probably from the color, but it's not happening because, again, of the black and white nature of this book. So to add, you know, more dark kind of solid areas would help a little bit with legibility of the images. But yeah, so here's the double page spread. I guess he wasn't quite clear back then on exactly how double page spread would work for the printing, so he just kept it simple, and really what we have are two splash pages that combine to create the double splash, which is fine and works. And the way, you know, this kind of focuses on the baby, and this kind of focuses on the skull, or the skeleton guy, or the devil, or whoever this is, holding the baby, the character holding the baby. It just creates that little bit of extra time that you're going to spend looking at the image more over here and then slowly moving over here. That's usually what the break does in an image like that. So again, very graphic, explaining some of the processes of abortion, so I'm not going to get into too many details, but that's why you've got the mutilated body. It does feel very much in line with some of the McFarlane stuff. You know, he's definitely read Spider-Man 6 and 7 with the Hobgoblin, right? And that's kind of the vibes I'm getting with this story here with the mutilated children and stuff. I got to applaud. I really like the ballsiness of all this extra texture he's adding in the background for what I assume is hell, you know, because of the fire. But I just feel like that would have been an area where the texturing's nice, but it would have used more dark spaces, would have helped create even more contrast, again, because of the black and white nature of the comic. So, uses a word, I'll just go back, because he uses a word that apparently, you know, it's taboo to use today, but I'm just reading and paraphrasing. So they ran tests, lots of tests, and each one said I'd be retarded, shameful, worthless. So the idea being that because they knew the baby was going to be retarded, that's why the mother got an abortion. But what happens is an angel swoops down, attacks this devil. I love this shot though, the knife coming through his head and stuff. This is very cool, very cool, very well done. And the angel basically brought up the baby to heaven. And remember this shot because it's going to be repeated later in the storyline. Again, pretty much the same verbatim kind of shot here. And here's what I'm going to point out as well. Like, he's doing the McFarlane stuff, you know, a lot, but then he'll come in and do something graphically very different. I feel like the image back here has nothing really to do with Todd McFarlane, maybe more The Crow or James O'Barr or something, but this definitely feels like different medium and different techniques are being used in the inking than most of the art in this book. And again, I think it works and it looks pretty cool and gives it kind of that indie vibe as well, and reminiscent of The Crow and that kind of stuff. But that differentiates his art from the Todd McFarlane stuff, and that's what's going to start as we go through making his art look different, right? So up in heaven, they meet Jesus, who we've met before, right? I think in issue 2, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, Jesus, I like kind of the effect here where there's almost no, you know, just a few kind of contour lines, not much hatching and stuff to give that luminescent effect, which I think works well, which would look even cooler with a bit of color. So Jesus being the king of men, I guess. He's got the crown here. And he does some interesting stuff here where the face kind of fades off a little bit and there's no holding contour line to the face and the hair kind of defines it. I think that looks pretty cool. Could be pushed further and probably, again, would look better with colors, but it's a nice kind of graphic experimentation that I think looks cool, but very, very kind of light and missing, again, probably would work better with a bit of black behind here and some more contrast. So Jesus basically takes care of the baby, and so that we find out that basically Vortex, the main character, is that baby. He's on a date here. He hasn't revealed that to her, but we have now gotten the backstory and kind of his origin. Here's another instance where I feel like he's kind of moving away from McFarlane. I definitely feel like this shot of the girl looking down, it's already hard to draw, so I can't fault him for doing that, but I'm pretty sure this is photo referenced. So even though we get the McFarlane style Mary Jane hair, which funny enough covers up her neck and is just a head with hair wrapped around it in the shot, maybe a bit of her neck and her upper torso would have been nice there, but the actual shot of it definitely photo referenced and looks nothing like McFarlane. The inking and the detail style does, but 100% photo referenced, I think. Again, because it does look much more realistic than, say, the shots of the lady here and some that we'll see a little bit later. And yeah, the Brad Pitt kind of look to Vortex, right? Like, it's when I saw this here, it was kind of a mix of the look, that movie where he plays the devil and he's wearing the suit, and the hair from Legends of the Fall and Interview with the Vampire, and the typical kind of Brad Pitt goatee that was going on there in the early 90s. This shot too of them on the hill with the background that looks very much to me like New York. I don't know if this is taking place in New York. I haven't even asked the question yet, but it's somewhat of an establishing shot here that we get, and I think that works really well. Another area where I feel like, okay, look at this panel, looks very McFarlane-y, if I can use that as an adjective. But then this one here looks photo referenced. Heavy shadow on the bottom, really nothing to do with McFarlane style. And the whole shot of the airplane's wing and engine and the character standing there in the foreground and the whole silhouette deal. This, to me, again, is Matthew Martin doing some more experimenting and moving away from the McFarlane style that I think works well, but that sometimes creates a bit of a clash within styles, especially on the same page, right? Like, this works well with this. These two don't kind of gel as well with this style, I think. So we get another shot now of a doctor, you know, and I guess we can guess the author's opinion on abortion from the storytelling and the angle he's taken on the story. I'll just leave it at that. But the doctor here, clearly half his face is like death's. So again, I think his point of view is fairly obvious. And then we're introduced to this character here, which again, I just think is a really cool design. Very 90s, obviously. The chains, the spikes, very McFarlane. But there's something about it that I really like. He's taken kind of the look of the Hobgoblin's hood, but it's almost kind of a sadomasochistic Moon Knight or something. And I really like the design and the way he uses, you know, the negative space here and no contour line for his head. I think works well and is interesting. And again, he's doing some graphic stuff that's interesting with the panel layering, very McFarlane as well. But I'm disappointed with this character when we get to see the rest of his costume, which I think is not right away, so I'll point it out when we get there. Some pretty graphic images of babies being cut. So yeah, this is definitely a rated R comic book, I would say. You know, not something I would present to small children. Not that I'm any kind of prude or anything, but for some people, this is kind of rough stuff. So basically taunting the doctor here about, you know, the things he's done, the babies he's killed. And then this is where I get disappointed with the character's design because, you know, like I said, I thought this was pretty cool. And then all of a sudden to discover that the lower half of his body is a woman's body, it's just very weird. I don't think he's meant to be a woman, right? Like he transforms from some sort of werewolf to a lady here. But I do think like he's got pectoral muscles and fairly masculine anatomy up here. So it just really stood out to me and was really weird that the bottom half of him to me looks very much more like a feminine design with the hips and the legs and the big thighs. Yeah, just looks very odd when we get here. Also resembles that villain from She-Ra, the old school 1980s cartoon, right? He-Man's sister. There was a lady villain. She was kind of a witch and her design was very similar to this. So I don't know exactly what's going on here. If this is some sort of cross-dressing character. I'm not sure. But yeah, a little disappointed by the skirt and the lady legs. Just an odd choice. So conflict between these two characters, our main character Vortex and cross-dressing dude. But Vortex picks up the baby and repeating the image that we saw at the beginning, just like the angel saves him somehow. And again, we get a background here, not the trees in the graveyard from before, but another city backdrop, very reminiscent of what's on that page and the style of that page too. So that's why that kind of flashback to that scene works here. We get it right away. And finally, we get Vortex confronting one of those abortion doctors, right? And again, kind of telling you a little bit. I'm going to assume that the author is Christian somehow. So, you know, obviously the doctor thinks he's going to get killed by Vortex here, but Vortex finishes off by saying, "But I don't seek revenge. I came here for a purpose. Thousands of people are murdered each day in this world. You're not going to be another statistic. Tonight, I'm the only one willing to say I forgive you." Which is, you know, just something that I wouldn't expect from a 90s comic and in tune with what generally the hero or the anti-hero would do at that moment. So I just want to point it out, not judging it one way or another, but very different that, you know, in this situation, you would definitely expect the hero to kill the doctor or to do something to him or to want to bring him to justice or something along those lines. And that's not what happens here. Very Christian sentiment with the conclusion to this story. Also, I like I'll mention the fact that we're in the room here, but he's added kind of the moon and the outside, like we can see past the walls and the windows here, which gives it kind of surrealist kind of vibe that I really like. That's kind of an interesting idea. And now we've got Vortex visiting his mother's grave. So mask is back on, so I guess kind of like Spawn, things are changing around. He doesn't have his cape anymore. Not 100% consistent with the costume, or it can move around, taking things out for graphic, you know, design reasons. I'm not quite sure, but pretty cool shot of him in a graveyard, you know, the typical 90s kind of stuff. Looks very McFarlane, this particular shot. And the hair, which I thought was maybe more kind of like the Shaft or the Spartan style headdress with the hair coming out, seems to be almost more like a mohawk here. So interesting. I'm not quite sure what's going to gel as his final design. We've already gotten two kind of variations on it. in 3 issues, or this being the 4th. So here's just the bit I wanted to read from the author. So, kind of giving you his point of view on the story and what it's meant to convey, right? Just so I guess no one gets offended. Dear reader, also Bittersweet Lane. That's a funny street name in Indiana. Dear reader, this book is not about condemning anyone for abortion. It's about forgiveness, as we saw at the end, right? You've just read 25 pages of my heart, and I'm not trying to tell you what's right and wrong, though I stand by my beliefs. I get that. I'm simply trying to communicate what a mistake abortion can be. So many people, when standing up for what they believe, tend to hurt those around them, thus driving everyone into a raging conflict over who is right and who is wrong. Again, kind of similar with some of the stuff that's been going on recently in the United States and the levels of violence that people are reaching, right? Just because of people's opinions, whether you agree or not, right? On both sides. I don't know what you believe, but if you will look around you, you will see that every day the value of life is dropping. People kill one another for a dirty look or for pulling off the exit ramp too slowly. Men rape and murder little children, and we would rather do away with the elderly than spend the time and money to let them live. It all comes back to the same question. How much do we appreciate the gift of life? People are important. They have something to give. Be slow to anger and quick to love. Have a little forgiveness. I believe we could change the world with that. Pretty good message, I would say, all around, whether you agree with him or not on the subject matter, right? I think he's kind of pointing out that everyone's got the right to their own opinion in a free society. So even back in 1994, these are themes, I guess, that were in the zeitgeist and the people were talking about and worried about even before the explosion of the internet. Here's the cover to Vortex number 5. Looks pretty cool. Don't have it yet, so we'll be looking at some more Matthew Martin soon, but not Vortex. Something else that he worked on, and at some point, hopefully I find the other issues. I don't know exactly how, if all the issues were published. I'm going to assume if he's advertising this one, it's published, but I really have to look into how many actual issues of Vortex there are. So I'm still missing, issue 3 and 5, apparently. See if I can find those at some point. Pretty cool looking pin up here. Good stuff. He's doing the McFarlane layering with the smoke and the cape and stuff. Very cool. And there's our cover with in black and white, no colors. So again, referring to what I was talking about with the interior art, if you look at this, great piece of art, right? But what happens when they throw in the colors, then you get all the contrast of light and dark and the values and stuff, and the drawing really pops, right? So I feel like that would even help the interior art if it was colored like the cover here. And the technique here, man, I could almost believe, if you look up close, because it's printed, it's a little harder to tell, but I feel like these are colored pencils or colored crayons that he's using. Some of these lines up here on the Reaper's blade and on the skeleton here, some of the textures I see, I feel this could actually be colored pencils, which is interesting for 1994. I don't think a lot of people were doing that. All right, guys, that is it for my review of Vortex number 4. If you are subscribed and you're still watching, thank you so much for the support. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. It really helps out the channel, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. So everyone, again, thanks so much for watching and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.